Hello, everyone, and welcome back to We the People. Today, will be discussing the Mexican American War. As always, I'm requesting that if you have not subscribed to my channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. So, without further ado, I present the Mexican American War. The Mexican American War of 1846 to 1848 marked the first U.S. armed conflict fought on foreign soil. It pitted a politically divided and militarily unprepared Mexico against the expansionist minded administration of the U.S. President James K. Polk, who believed the United States had a manifest destiny to spread across the continent to the Pacific Ocean. A border skirmish among the Rio Grande that started off the fighting was followed by a series of U.S. victories. When the dust cleared, Mexico had lost about one-third of its territory, including nearly all of the present day California, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. The causes of the Mexican American War: Texas gained its independence from Mexico in 1836. Initially, the United States declined to incorporate it into the Union, largely because Northern political interests were against the addition of a new state that would support slavery. The Mexican government was also encouraging border raids and warning that any attempt at annexation would lead to war. Nonetheless, annexation procedures were quickly initiated after the 1844 election of Polk, a firm believer in the doctrine of manifest destiny, who campaigned that Texas should be reannexed and that the Oregon Territory should be reoccupied. Polk also had his eyes on California, New Mexico, and the rest of what is today the American Southwest. The manifest destiny, a phrase coined in 1845, is the idea that the United States is destined by God, its advocates believe, to expand its dominion and spread democracy and capitalism across the entire North American continent. The philosophy drove 19th century U.S. territorial expansion and was used to justify the forced removal of Native Americans and other groups from their homes. The rapid expansion of the United States intensified the issue of slavery as new states were added to the Union, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War. When offers to purchase those lands was rejected, Polk instigated a fight by moving troops into a disputed zone between the Rio Grande and the Nueces River that both countries had previously recognized as part of the Mexican state of Coahuila. On April 25, 1846, Mexican cavalry attacked a group of U.S. soldiers in the disputed zone under the command of General Zachary Taylor, killing about a dozen. Then they laid siege to Fort Texas along the Rio Grande. Taylor called in reinforcements and, with the help of superior rifles and artillery, was able to defeat the Mexicans at the Battle of Palo Alto and the battles of Resaca de la Palma. Following those battles, Polk told the U.S. Congress that the cup of forbearance has been exhausted even before Mexico passed the boundary of the United States, invaded our territory, and shed American blood upon American soil. 2 days later, on May 13th, Congress declared war, despite opposition from some northern lawmakers. No official declaration of U.S. Army advances into Mexico. At that time, only about 75,000 Mexican citizens lived north of the Rio Grande. As a result, U.S. forces led by Colonel Stephen Watts Kearny and Commodore Robert Field Stockton were able to conquer those lands with minimal resistance. Taylor, likewise, had little trouble advancing, and he captured the city of Monterrey in September. With the losses adding up, Mexico turned to old standby General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the charismatic strongman who had been living in exile in Cuba. Santa Anna convinced Polk that if allowed to return to Mexico, he would end the war on terms favorable to the United States. But when Santa Anna arrived, he immediately double-crossed Polk by taking control of the Mexican army and leading it into battle. At the Battle of Buena Vista in February of 1847, Santa Anna suffered heavy casualties and was forced to withdraw. Despite the loss, he assumed the Mexican presidency the following month. Meanwhile, U.S. troops, led by General Winfield Scott, landed in Veracruz and took over the city. They then began marching towards Mexico City, essentially following the same route that Hernan Cortez followed when he invaded the Aztec Empire. The Mexicans resisted at the Battle of Cerro Gordo and elsewhere, but were bested each time. In September 1847, Scott successfully laid siege to Mexico City's Chapultepec Castle. During that clash, a group of military school cadets, those so-called Niños Héroes, purportedly committed suicide rather than surrender. Guerrilla attacks against U.S. supply lines continued, but for all intents and purposes, the war had ended. Santa Anna resigned, and the United States waited for a new government capable of negotiations to form. Finally, on February 2, 1848, a Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, establishing the Rio Grande and not the Nueces River as the U.S.-Mexican border. Under the treaty, Mexico had recognized the U.S. annexation of Texas and agreed to sell California and the rest of its territory north of the Rio Grande for $15 million plus the assumption of certain damage claims. The net gain in U.S. territory after the Mexican-American War was roughly 525,000 square miles, an enormous tract of land, nearly as much as the Louisiana Purchase, 827,000 square miles. That would forever change the geography, culture, and economy of the United States. Did you know gold was discovered in California just days before Mexico ceded the land to the United States in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo? Though the war with Mexico was over, the battle over the newly acquired territories and whether or not slavery would be allowed in those territories was just beginning. Many of the U.S. officers and soldiers in the Mexican-American War would in just a few years find themselves once again taking up arms, but this time against their own countrymen in the Civil War. So this is the information I have from the History Channel on the Mexican-American War. And again, I'd like to do a shout out to the History Channel. That's where I get most of my information from. And I also, at this time, would like to ask you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed. Also hit that like button. And watch for future videos coming up. I do have another one coming out on the next president in a couple of days. So without further ado, I bid you farewell, and God bless America.